The Assaulted is a work of historical fiction whose main storyline occurs from April to November of 2018. The Assaulted is about mass shootings that have occurred in the United States since Columbine. Every shooting included in this work has been meticulously researched, and its events are presented as honestly and accurately as possible in order to pay homage to the victims and their families. Any and all persons specifically mentioned in this work are presented in the best possible light. At no time is it my intention to anger, hurt, or defame anyone other than the actual shooters of the included events. These individuals can rot in hell for all I care. If I have offended anyone else, my sincere apologies. And now, The Assaulted.
Somehow this has become routine. The reporting is routine. My response here at this podium ends up being routine. The conversation in the aftermath of it, we've become numb to this. We talked about this after Columbine and Blacksburg, after Tucson, after Newtown, after Aurora, after Charlestown. It cannot be this easy for somebody who wants to inflict harm on other people to get his or her hands on a gun.
The Assaulted. Prologue. Columbine, Colorado. It became real on April 21st, 1999. A student or students of a high school in Colorado whose existence was taking up hours on every major network, whose name and the names of murdered friends and a faculty member would be on the front pages of newspapers all over the world, were already deep into what had become an all-night project to honor that faculty member, a coach, and more importantly, at least in their minds, a computer teacher, a man who had always made them feel as though they were gifted, not different. It began as a tribute to him. As the night progressed and the realization struck that this sadness, this ache, this feeling of nightmarish horror would only subside with time, it went from a tribute page to something far more. It became a place for people to go and talk with those who understood, to listen to those who needed to scream, to rage, to let their deepest emotions go. It was only for survivors, both of physical and mental wounds, and loved ones. And unfortunately, it grew. Those who were invited would receive a card. Initially, the hosts or hosts bought them from a local drugstore. Subsequently, as it grew and donations from those who knew reached the hosts, special cards were printed. However, the invitation was always handwritten. The recipients always meticulously researched. The words inside honest and sincere. Whatever pain the survivor or loved one was feeling was expressed in words that made them know that whoever wrote this note had also been into that very dark place, and that there was help if they wanted it. There would always be a request not to share the contents of the card. There would be assurances that everyone associated with their tragedy would receive the same card, would have the same opportunity to grieve with those who had walked the same path as them. And those who received these cards quickly found out that everyone who had been touched by tragedy had received one of their own. It was hidden well. It always took at least 3 different usernames and just as many passwords to find it. It was moved often and effectively. Due to the circle of suffering becoming wider over time, several computer-savvy people besides the original hosts had a hand in keeping it secure, for they had needed it as well, and it had been there. It remained hidden for over 25 years. The men, women, and children who went there understood its almost religious nature. It was only for those who had suffered a loss due to a mass shooting. Those who had to deal with the indescribable searing in your brain of losing a loved one, or of witnessing people they knew being ripped apart by a bullet, or feeling the fire inside them, not being able to scream or move, knowing there might be another bullet with their name on it. Those who could never move themselves away from the terror, for they had woken up in a hospital and been told that because of some deranged monster, they could no longer walk, or see, or hear, or talk, or hold, or think clearly. This could not be for anybody else but them. It had started as a small site to honor a dead teacher. It had grown to well over 30,000 members, every single member wishing they were not. This huge group always wishing and praying that no one else would join them. Yet, when it happened, and it always happened, the last member, as they were called on site, would always hear from other members about the love, friendship, and openness of this group. When they most needed support, most needed a proverbial shoulder to cry on, someone was always there to help them. When they wanted to rage, curse God, and scream that no one was doing anything, fuck the government, fuck the NRA, that's where they went. People would listen. People would care. People would cry. The site was www.theassaulted.com. It was always referred to by members as the site. Everyone on the site called themselves the Assaulted. Chapter 1. Waffle House, Antioch, Tennessee, April 22nd, 2018. Raymond J Wilson, known to all as Ray, loved his wife. He was crazy about her. She was the love of his life. Marion, my librarian, he would sing Robert Preston style, had entered his life at a relatively late age. Both married previously, both divorced. They'd met at one of the last networking events he would ever attend, a business after hours at a local Gainesville, Virginia company, 40 miles outside his front rural farm. They started chatting because they realized they were the only people at the event that each other was interested in. She was the executive director of a national nonprofit that subsidized teachers and tutors to teach reading to disadvantaged children. A former library director, Marion the librarian, who loved her job and everything that went with it, including travel, and the seeking of folks with the big bucks, as she liked to say. One reason she had been interested in Ray? Everyone in Northern Virginia knew Ray had big bucks. Luckily, this upcoming trip was to be the last without him. After 10 years of marriage and countless lonely plane flights, Marion and Ray were going to be traveling together. He had just retired as a commercial real estate broker, had made millions, and couldn't think of anything he'd rather do than wandering around cities and towns while Marion, quote, keeps me in the lifestyle I've gotten accustomed to. This last trip was to take her into Tennessee, the Nashville area. She'd be staying at the Holiday Inn Express and Suites. She was a member of their rewards club. Ray would tell friends that she's got so many points we could stay at Holiday Inns free for the rest of our lives. April 16th to April 23rd. Then they'd head to San Diego and the Hotel del Coronado. She didn't know, but he had booked the Victorian suite, reserved a romantic dinner on their balcony, plus arranged all the hotel shit she likes to do. Whenever she was away, they had a ritual. When she woke up, she'd FaceTime him. When you're at your prettiest. He always looked like hell in the morning. She'd FaceTime him at lunchtime to make sure you're eating healthy. He was a sweetaholic. She'd FaceTime him at night. It made them both get to sleep easier. One other time, if either was having trouble sleeping, one would FaceTime the other and chat with the insomniac until he or she felt tired. It might be 5 minutes or an hour, but they'd hang in, knowing how tough it was to sleep without the other. That's the schedule they kept on that Nashville trip. Morning, noon, night FaceTime with no middle-of-the-night calls until Sunday morning, April 22nd. Ray heard the familiar buzz. Hey, babe. What time is it? Hi, baby. I couldn't sleep. I can see that. Where are you? I saw a Waffle House across the street. Just having a hot chocolate, trying to figure if I should be bad and have a waffle. He looked at the time. 4:15 his, 3:15 hers. A waffle at 3:15? Think you'll be able to fit in your thong next weekend? Giggle. Sweetie, no one in this world wants to see me in a thong, especially that Hotel Del bunch. I do. Smile. And that's why I love you so. Think I'll get back to the room. Love you too, Marion the librarian. Glad I could help. Mwah. Mwah. She was gone. He smiled, went right back to sleep. The phone rang again at 5 a.m. At first he smiled. She's calling me back. Then he realized the phone was ringing, not buzzing. Babe? Serious, professional voice. Is this Raymond J Wilson, married to Marion F. Wilson? A nervous feeling suddenly gripped Ray's stomach. Yes, this is Ray Wilson. He would remember the following for the rest of his life. I'm Detective Watson, Nashville Police. Mr. Wilson, your wife was involved in a shooting at the Waffle House in Antioch this morning. That's impossible, he yelled. I spoke to Marion at 3:15. Mr. Wilson, she was headed back to her room. She told me so. Mr. Wilson, she was headed out when someone walked in carrying an AR-15 automatic. He killed 3 people, shot your wife several times. She was transported to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. She's in extremely critical condition. We suggest... Those are the last words Ray Wilson heard. He threw on jeans, t-shirt, jacket, ran out to his car, careened out the driveway, calling Dulles Airport for the first available flight to Nashville. American Airlines, 5:12 a.m. While driving at over 100 miles per hour, he called the airlines. After explaining the situation in as calm a voice as he could muster, they agreed to hold the plane until he arrived, which ended up being about 5:20. While boarding, he called Detective Watson, gave him the particulars, and asked him to have a police cruiser meet him at the plane. It was a 24-hour, 2-hour flight. The words, extremely critical, screamed in his head. American Airlines upgraded him to first class. The staff was solicitous, but he needed nothing other than to see Marion, sitting up in bed, smiling at him, saying, I knew I shouldn't have woken you up. Then his rational self reappeared, the self that had earned and kept over $20 million in an erratic D.C. commercial market. Ray Wilson always prepared for every contingency, in business or his personal life. So he started preparing for the worst of all contingencies. He woke up Maddox Funeral Home's director in downtown Front Royal and started efforts there. He woke up several friends in Front Royal town government for assurances that what he wanted to do would not be a problem. He woke up his old friend Kim Jones and asked her if she'd be able to sing a particular song. He had loved her voice for over 30 years. Through sobs, she said yes. The plane landed, parked in a spot away from the terminal, where several police cruisers, lights flashing, waited. The attendants came to his seat. Mr. Wilson, the Nashville police are waiting to take you to your wife. Thank you for your kindness. You're welcome. God bless you. Both flight attendants had tears in their eyes. Walking down the exit steps, he saw a group of uniformed and plainclothes officers waiting. The one in front was tall, ruggedly built, plainclothes. His face said what Ray wanted to know. Mr. Wilson, I'm Detective Watson. We spoke on the phone. I'm sorry to... Detective, please don't say any more. I know. Please take me to my wife. They got to the medical center as fast as a 5-car caravan could get there. At one point, Ray apologized to Watson for being so abrupt. He needed to see, not hear. The detective understood. Everyone reacted differently, but ultimately, everybody acted the same. Ray was led to a viewing room off the morgue. He gently but firmly stated that he needed to be there, to see and touch her, to know that it was done, over. They took him inside. It was done. It was over. The AR-15 bullets had stitched an almost straight line across her lower rib cage. Still wearing clothing he'd seen just a few short hours before. He stood, staring at her. Dates, walks, vacations, laughs, love, flying through his head. Where they had been, where they were going. It seemed like just a minute. Mr. Wilson? Detective? I'm sorry they've allowed you an hour in here, but they need the room. The staff informed me a Maddox Funeral Home has already made arrangements. You'll be flying out on American Airlines at 10:38 to Dulles. With Marion? Yes, sir. With Marion. I'm sorry, we got to get out of here. I understand. Thanks for your patience. Instead of coffee at the farm, underneath his huge, scraggly oak tree, sitting on one of the matching chairs he'd made for them, he was sitting in a hospital cafeteria mindlessly drinking cup after cup, seeing the bullet holes in his wife's body, not being able to forget it, to shake it. He didn't feel the taps, hear the voice, for at least a minute. Mr. Wilson? Mr. Wilson. Startled, he jumped, then replied, Oh. Yes, detective. They're ready to head to the airport. Ray climbed into the detective's car, now noticing a hearse behind them. Detective, do you mind if I ride with my wife? Fine, I'll wait until the driver flashes his lights at me. Ray went back to the hearse. They arrived at the airport just on time. Time enough for him to watch the casket being moved into the underbelly of the plane. For him to be told again that American Airlines was picking up the tab and that they were deeply sorry for his loss. Time enough for him to think about how, in the span of about 6 hours, his life had completely come to an end. Time enough. Mr. Wilson? I'm sorry, but for a hell of a long time, everybody that calls me Mr. Wilson has given me shitty news. Please call me Ray. Ray, I'm Maxine. I'm here to help you with anything you need on this flight. Get you something to drink? To eat? Sorry, Maxine. It's been a lousy few hours. I understand. Quite well. For the first time, Ray looked up. Tall, young, African-American, shortish hair, pretty. Not beautiful, but pretty. Small smile on her face, her eyes letting him know she gave a shit about him and how he felt. I'm sorry, you understand quite well? Yes, she hesitated. Ray, in a few days you'll be receiving a card. It will look like all the other bereavement cards you'll receive. But notice the postmark. Open it, follow the instructions. I promise you it will help you in ways you can't even comprehend right now. Please, promise me you'll open it. Her eyes filled with tears. Ray reflexively grabbed her hand. She held his as tight as she could. Just promise me. Maxine, I promise. Good. I'll look for you. What? She smiled. You'll see. You'll understand. Anything you need on board, let me know. An uneventful flight, as uneventful as taking your dead wife home can be. Again, they landed, stopped away from the terminal. Ray looked out the window, saw a Maddox limo and hearse waiting on the tarmac, and nodded. They were efficient. As he was leaving the plane, he caught Maxine's eye. Don't forget, soft smile. Thanks, I won't. The next days were a crush of phone calls, media, friends, relatives, a crush of ache, loneliness, quiet, a crush of memories. She was there, everywhere in the farmhouse. The paintings on the walls, the bright ocean colors she loved, the mismatched china she loved to entertain with, just to see the faces on the snooty fuckers who thought she should feed them porterhouse on Wedgwood rather than Walmart. Then the tree. The reason he bought the farm in the first place. He was a Northern Virginia boy, born and raised in Alexandria, lived in Springfield, worked in Herndon and Fairfax and Arlington. Knew the commercial real estate market when it was climbing and tanking. He'd made and lost and made a fortune, finally keeping it. He'd worked hard. He'd had good fortune thrust on him, and he made some stay with him. He wanted more. He wanted peace and quiet, and, as he liked to put it, a place where I can stare into space and like what I see. He searched the Gainesville, Marshall, Front Rural area for years, realizing that to find the peace he craved, he'd have to move farther from the congestion he helped create. Just before he had met Marion, he was meandering, as he liked to say, through Front Royal, when suddenly he stopped, almost getting rear-ended. The tree was huge, oak, and magnificent. If you did not believe in a creator, you would after looking at this tree. The way he'd describe it to folks visiting was, once you make the right off 66, just keep going until you see a tree on your left like the one in Forrest Gump, only cooler. Make that left and look for the lights. Marion fell in love with the tree, so much so that they'd promised each other, soon after they were married, that they'd be buried side by side underneath it. She had just turned 50. He figured she'd have to make sure that it could be done the way they'd dreamed. So he had done the research, gotten the approvals, and had put it with his important shit so she'd know where to find it. But it was Ray who had to find it, make sure all the states and towns' wishes were respected, make the calls, send the invitations, arrange for security to stop a prying press from interfering, and Ray to find a minister, a keyboard player, and a singer for the service. The singer was easy. Kim Jones had the most beautiful voice in Front Royal. She'd won local and statewide singing competitions, yet had never made the big time. She and Ray had had a fling years ago. Now she was a dear friend to both he and Marion, sang every so often at her church and occasionally at her favorite karaoke hangout. She had known and dreaded it, knowing there was no earthly way she was going to keep her composure. She felt herself a professional. She wanted to sing the best she possibly could for her friends. It arrived. On the day he and his librarian were to run away to San Diego, he was laying her under their tree. The minister was fine, although a little long-winded for Ray's taste. The hymns were there for the other mourners, about 100, including Marion's small family, grown daughter, an aunt, a couple of cousins, and his, much larger, including 2 ex-wives, several cross-country kids, a couple of aunts and uncles, and too many cousins to count. Plus, there were close friends and several people in town Ray knew Marion liked. Her hairdresser, the kid at the Circle K who rang up her morning coffee, and most everybody at the Apple House, her favorite place in Front Royal. "They're in Linden, dear," Ray would always mutter, smiling. He placed Kim and the song at the end. "Who Are You Waiting For?" written and sung originally by Melissa Etheridge. They had seen her on one of their first dates, and she had performed it playing the piano, no other instruments. About halfway through, they both noticed the other crying. No mention about it, though. It wasn't until the wedding preparation that they discussed it, why and how it had affected them, and why it had to be included in their ceremony. Both Marion and Ray were alcoholics, functioning alcoholics, able to kick ass and take names all day. Also, to go home, and instead of reaching for dinner, reaching for either Chivas Regal, her, or Jack Daniels, him. They'd seen each other at their absolute worst, loud, belligerent, mad at the world. Through the help of self-intervention, a psychiatrist, and several therapists, they were able to kick booze and stay sober the entire length of their marriage. They each credited the other with the strength, love, and confidence to keep moving forward every day. There were several people that knew the importance of that song. Kim knew. She sang beautifully. The keyboardist was magnificent. His solos seemed to dance in the air all around them. And then, on the final note, Kim broke down. It was beautiful. It was haunting. It was gut-wrenching. Everyone was sobbing, holding on to each other, shoulders heaving, a scene that would make anyone dissolve. Except one man. Ray stood, stoic. Not a tear, not a gasp, not a whimper. He had not cried since his first conversation with Detective Watson. Not even his bullet-whittled life on a morgue slab had broken him. He was emotional, all right. Very emotional. Anger. Pure, white light hatred. An anger so pure that if anyone had looked into his soul, they would have been scared for themselves and for everyone around them. He had heard from Detective Watson that the killer had been caught. A nutty motherfucker wearing just a green jacket, the crazy son of a bitch being naked underneath, who had stepped into the same fucking Waffle House his wife was leaving and stitched his fucking AR-15 bullets into her body. Yay. He felt like saying, "Well, gosh, Detective, that's great news. You caught the low-life piece of shit that destroyed Marion and my fucking life together. Want to sing at her funeral?" Instead, he thanked Watson for his kindness and complimented him on catching the accused assailant so quickly. He ranked this call with the functionary cards and letters he'd received from a host of politicians, including congressmen, senators, and his governor, and how their, quote, thoughts and prayers were with him and his family at his time of tragic loss. The reply he had wanted to send to all of them would have been the same. "Dear asshole, not only do you not give a shit about my wife and I, not only do you not give a shit that an assault weapon, an assault weapon whose sole purpose is to kill as many humans as is possible given the place and circumstances, was used to tear my wife in half, you've actually kept legislation whose purpose would have been to outlaw these fucking hand-carried death machines from coming close to passing. I ask you, on behalf of humanity, to head to the Beltway. Stop your car on the roadside. Wait for an 18-wheel monster barreling down at 75 to 80 miles an hour, and just when it gets 20 yards from you, step in front of it. I'll send your spouses a card expressing my, quote, thoughts and prayers for their loss. Ray had written that a dozen times, and always crumpled it up and threw it away. His response was no response. Not to politicians, not to media, not to relatives and friends. He answered no phone calls, sent out no thank you notes, and continued to sink deeper and deeper into his own hatred of everyone and everything. The night of the funeral, after he laid Mary and the librarian under their tree, he found himself in front of 411 South Street in Front Royal, staring at the entrance to the liquor store. He knew that no one would blame him. Everyone would understand the hell he had just gone through and would continue to go through. If anyone deserved a bender, it's old Ray, they'd say. But there was this voice, so clear he could hear it. A presence, so real he could feel it. Her sound, her smell, it filled the car. Ray, don't do it, Ray. Baby, I'm okay. I'm in a wonderful place. I will always love you. I'll always be with you. Don't do it, Ray. If you love me, don't do it. Don't do it. For me. Rap on the car window. Ray? Ray, that you? Ray jolted awake. What? Hi, Ray, it's me, Larry Peters. Played keyboard at your wife's funeral? Oh, hi, Larry. You look a little different. Yeah, my real job's a front row cop. When I got on shift 3 hours ago, you were here. Saw your head against the window just now, and well, with everything. I'm fine, officer. Larry. Just needed to get away for a while. He nodded toward the liquor store. Used to be one of my favorite haunts. Needed to be talked out of going in. You helped. It's been closed for 2 hours, Ray. I didn't do much of anything. You did a hell of a lot, especially this morning. Thanks again. It wasn't much. I was doing what I felt I had to do. Ray, is there anything else I can do? Anything I can help you with? Thanks, Larry. I'm fine. Heading back home. Drive safe. He stopped. I'm sick about what happened to your wife. We cops hate those goddamn assault weapons. Every time we get a call where one of them is involved, well, it gives you a sick feeling. I can imagine. You'd think those idiots in D.C. would listen to us and ban them. I'm sorry, Ray. I just wanted you to know how most of us feel. I appreciate everything you've done and said, Larry. Gave me something to think about. Good night. They shook hands goodnight, and Ray started back to the farm, thinking about Larry. Those idiots in D.C. would listen to us and ban him. He knew why Marion had been there, talking him out of the booze. He needed to stay clear, stay focused. He needed to think this out. He needed to congregate his thoughts into one coherent plan. A plan that would get those idiots to listen. He was back home in the kitchen, making a big pot of coffee. While the coffee was brewing, he idly flipped through the pile of mail he hadn't gone through for days. Suddenly, he froze, almost forgetting to breathe. He stared at the postmark on the relatively large card envelope. Columbine, Colorado. Maxine, the card. He almost tore it open. On the front was a photo taken in what appeared to be a heavily wooded area, on a trail, with light coming in through an opening where the path was leading. Inside, handwritten, was a note, along with a sheet of paper. The note read, Dear Ray, on behalf of everyone associated with our group, we mourn with you the loss of your wife, Marion. We all have felt the pain and suffering that you are feeling this very moment. The anger, the frustration, the emptiness, all are familiar to us. And yet yours is uniquely different than everyone's because it's yours. None of us can feel what you feel. We can only tell you that we wish you weren't feeling it. We wish we did not have to send you this card. We wish that you and Marion had been together until your lives were over in some other fashion than through a lunatic's AR-15. What we can do is mourn with you. We can talk with you. We can try as best we can to make the healing process at least a little easier. With this card is a sheet of instructions and passwords. We set up our website this way so that the general public does not participate in it. This site is only for those who have suffered a loss through a mass shooting, 4 deaths or more, since Columbine in April 1999. We hope that you will visit often and become a part of this site. If you do not want to participate, please destroy the instructions. Again, Ray, we mourn your loss. We hope we get to meet you. It was signed, your friends at www.theassaulted.com. Ray quickly read over the full page of instructions, went over to his laptop, and began. He knew a little bit about the computers, but these guys were amazing. He literally was going to be sent to 4 individual sites, obviously friendsoftheassaulted.com, that had nothing to do with politics, news, or opinion. One was a tattoo parlor in Maine. The final screen was blank, except for his name and password. Name was all lowercase, dashes in between. Raymond J Wilson. His password, Antioch 10. Welcome to the Assaulted, Antioch 10 was how the first page of the site greeted him. There was an introduction similar to his card, but more detailed. It explained that no names were to be used on the site to keep everyone's identity private. Then in parenthesis, if you're here any length of time, we'll know who you are, but it's important they don't know. Then there was the site. It was huge. A detailed history of mass shootings in the United States with contributions from the assaulted. Memorials and histories for the victims, again, with pictures, videos, audios added by the members. A listing of the ways to contact congressmen and senators, governors and legislatures, along with suggestions on who to go through, normally assaulted members. A history of the firearms used in the shootings, who made or makes them, background on them, and the history of the legislation against them. Then there were articles, videos, audios, interviews of almost every topic relating to healing and moving forward from tragedy, including examples. Speaking of help, it was all there. Free FaceTime, live chat, group meetings, single therapy, all with volunteer trained psychiatrists and counselors. One of these psychiatrists, counselors / mentors would also be assigned to the last member, as every new member was called, to go over what was available to them. Plus, there was always a list of everyone online. If you recognize someone, you could live chat them just by highlighting their assaulted name and alerting them through a button push. Ray was stunned. He'd been expecting maybe a memorial type of site. Not this. This was remarkable. Not bright and cheery, but not dark and angry either. An incredibly well done site. Then he saw the live chat pop up. It's 4 a.m. Who the hell would want to talk to me at 4 a.m.? And who the hell is Navy Yard 14? I know we're not supposed to use names, he read. But hi, Ray. It's Maxine. He wrote back, Maxine? From the flight, Maxine? Okay, we gotta be good now, LOL. Yes, it's me, Navy Yard 14.